All right, then. We'll move on to the first topic then. And this one, we're going to get a little, well, is it deep? Well, it's kind of deep.
Yeah, it's kind of deep.
It's kind of deep. But we kind of wanted to talk about the issue of mental health and how it pertains to hip hop. Hip hop and mental health have a very interesting relationship in that it's very much been like covered a lot, like depending on certain artists. But mental health as a concept, I'm not sure how much it permeates in hip hop generally, even though we have artists that address their own like mental states a lot as well. But as an overall community, I'm not sure how high we rank it as far as like a concern. And recently we've had, throughout history, we've had like Scarface, Mind's Playing Tricks on Me. We've had Harley DiCaprio recently, who basically, he's a UK rapper, who basically wrote a statement talking about how much the music industry has ravaged his mental health along with other things. And we kind of just wanted to have a conversation about the idea of hip hop and its relationship with mental health. Is it something that we should be paying more attention to? Should labels be legally obliged to, if their artists are going through mental health issues, to help them out, and where our thoughts lie with it, basically. So, boys, hip hop, mental health, thoughts?
Ooh,
It's what do you say?
it's heavy,
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
what I was gonna say. It's heavy because it goes into. To me, it's bigger than hip hop. This question, in terms of it leads into black men and mental health, and do we do enough as men talking about it? If you get what I mean,
We absolutely do.
do we?
I think when we first when we were constructing this topic, I think initially, so the topic itself took form in a couple of different ways. We were initially going to tackle Harley DiCaprio's statement, and then I added the bit about, I guess why I added on a little bit to it was because I was listening to a song by Scarface called "I Seen a Man Die," and don't know why, but I was just listening to a lot of Scarface, and he's got some dark songs. He's got quite a lot of dark songs where he's clearly had mental health issues. He's clearly like been expressing it through his art and that, and then it kind of took me down a rabbit hole of other artists that have done the same. Then I thought about Biggie, with suicidal thoughts and that. The guy had an album called Ready to Die, for goodness sake. You know what I mean? So like, this guy was clearly like expressing things that were weighing heavy on him in many different ways. And I'm not saying the whole album was about that, but in large quantities it definitely was. And then my favorite rapper of all time, Tupac Shakur, like God knows how many albums or songs he was talking about his mortality. This guy was obsessed with his own mortality. That doesn't come from someone that's not dealing with some sort of mental health issues. You listen to songs like So Many Tears and If I Die Tonight, and like the list goes on, man. Death Around the Corner, the list goes on. Do you know what I mean, man? Like these are artists that definitely have had mental health issues. So I think to your statement, these are black men that have been screaming out for a minute. But I think where I wanted to take this was us as consumers and how we look at it. Because if we enjoy the art, it's easy to just take it and that's what it is. And you know what I mean? You've got a bit of a barrier and a distance to it. So why don't us as consumers make more noise about it? Why do we just
On behalf of the artist,
yeah,
or
why do we just enjoy the music and not ask any questions? And in this social media age where you could probably reach out to artists or make more noise about it, why don't we do that? Why do we just accept the art as the art and not think anything more of it? Because a lot of artists have dove into some dark stuff, but we just take it as, they're just being deep and personal and that. Nah, this shit's serious.
I think this is where the blurring of the lines between entertainment and reality are heavily at play. We can listen to that as a form of escapism. We can listen to these kind of songs as relatable. Someone like Kid Cudi comes into my thoughts because I've seen and heard a lot of people say that Kid Cudi, despite his depressive thoughts and everything that he's spoken about and sung about in his music, has helped save their lives. So it's very blurry. Like, some people only see music, whatever the subject matter, as escapism, voyeurism. They listen to this and keep it moving. Others might take more of an emotional interest in it, and they might be more compelled to be concerned about said artist. So I guess it just depends on which part which side of the fence you're on. I think nowadays, especially as you said, it is easier for if you do feel like your favorite artist is suffering, you can just reach out or at them and be like, you know, I'm concerned, this, that, the other. Back in the day, probably not so much. And I suppose back in the day as well, even though Scarface and Tupac and Biggie was doing all this stuff, they were still not necessarily gangsters, but they still had bravado. So it kind of mixed with that. So it kind of muddied the waters in a little bit more because, okay, you're saying this, but you're also saying this. So we don't really know. I mean, I don't know because I was young.
Can I push back on that?
Of course you can.
Like, I think when you're talking about bravado, you're talking about ego, innit? But I think it takes stripping yourself of ego to a certain extent to dive into the stuff that they dive into, though. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't know how much that mattered or matters. Because if they're expressing it, it's not coming from an egotistical place, I don't think. When you're telling the world that you're having suicidal thoughts or, you know, you're I don't know, you're in a dark space about this, or you're in a dark space about that, and, you know, your mortality is like heavily on your mind and that. That's not coming from an egotistical place or a bravado place.
But, as I said, escapism, I think, is at play. Because even if you are a fan of a Tupac, let's say, and he's saying thug life here, but he's also saying death round the corner here. If you're listening to music only for escapism and voyeurism, you might not necessarily take as seriously someone who's saying they're suicidal versus someone who's saying they'll kill someone. You know what I mean? So with that, again, it just depends on which side you're on. Like, if you are someone that values the emotional versus the bravado or the other way around, that's going to dictate your responses to things. Like, if we were our age listening to Tupac, we probably think there's something wrong with this guy. But people back then, maybe not, maybe they didn't as much. You know what I mean? So it very much depends on the person. It very much depends on the consumer. Is it a responsibility of consumers to be concerned or, you know, kind of act on it? Again, I think it depends. I think it really, really depends on how they really feel about it. Because if there's people who are already like, you know, of a disposition to be concerned about, you know, young black men, especially rapping about these sort of things, then they might be a little more concerned. But if they're not, then they're not going to be. You know what I mean? What do you think, Mo?
It's a tricky one because I'm hearing what you're saying, but I agree with you in terms of take Tupac because he's going to be the prominent person we talk about because I feel like he was the most open that I've listened to in terms of mental health. But if you give me a song like If I Die Tonight and then the next song is Hit 'Em Up, it's almost the bravado is covering the mental state they're going through.
Which is what a lot of black men do.
Exactly. That's why I say it's a bigger conversation with black men because I do feel like we cover a lot of mental health with bravado. So as a consumer, yeah, you're going to give me a song that's talking about your mental health, but if the flip song is I'm about to do XYZ, I'm completely away from what I've just heard, if you get what I mean. It's not a constant. So I think that's the problem with mental health. If it's not a constant and then you've got one song that is, but then the next 5 songs are talking about XYZ, it's going to be hard for, even though I know what you've spoke about is dark, I'm not going to go back 5 songs and remember what you're going through. Unfortunately, just as a consumer, because we knew as a kid when Biggie named his album Ready to Die, even years later, like, I've never really looked at it like, yo, this guy was really talking about his own mortality in that album. And obviously, I knew it's in your face.
Neither do I.
But I've never really sat on it and I've gone, yo, this is really dark stuff to be naming your album Ready to Die. And
What about today, though? Do you not think that today?
Well, now, yeah, I'm saying at 30 now, yeah. But I'm saying for a long time in my life, when I heard Ready to Die, I was just like, yo, he's facing your own mortality and it happening. There's no, do you know what I mean? It's just, it didn't.
With Ready to Die in particular, I see it kind of more as a double meaning, especially now. Ready to Die in the sense of like, I don't give a fuck. Whatever happens, I'm good. I'm ready. So that's the bravado.
Yeah.
Ready to Die, I'm actually going through shit. That's the emotional. So there's an interplay here. And I think it always has been, even if we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But I interrupted you.
No, I feel like that's always been the life of a black man. It's always been the bravado versus what you're really going through. That's why I say it's a bigger conversation. Now, in terms of your question, do the record label have a duty? I think 1,000% you do. No matter who you are. If you're signing 16, 17, 18-year-olds, you can't tell me you don't have... When you signed Hardy...
Hold on. hold that thought. Don't lose that.
I won't.
Before we get to the record labels, though, I think where I was kind of taking us was just the hip hop community as a whole, including the media, because they're great for encouraging beef and reporting on beef and that. But and they study these artists because they have to interview them. They listen to the music. So even in the night, I'm talking about specifically the 90s. It would have been great for them to, I guess, hone in on some of these stuff, especially when they are interviewing these
Can I ask you a question?
and ask questions about mental health and things of that nature. Even though it was back in the 90s and it was more of a taboo, but still.
Can I ask you a question though?
And I would expect that of today, and I think it happens more today. But you got like the Breakfast Clubs and Charlemagne's and that, but that hasn't always been a thing though.
But that's because I think, I don't mean to interrupt you. Do they care? Because who ran the...
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Who ran Hot 97? Who ran Power 105? Who ran... Sway? Do you know what I mean? All of these stations in the 90s, there was just one end goal. And that's whatever it is to make money, we need to make money. We don't care how these guys are. And I still feel like that in life. Now, yeah, you've got the odd Charlemagne's and who asks you straight, Sways who will ask you, yo, how you doing mentally? But we're giving them too much of a... We're giving them way too much credit if we think that they should be doing a job that we know they don't care about. Do you know what I mean? I genuinely feel like in the 90s, the last thing on their mind, especially how taboo it was, and it was black man, and they didn't want us to prosper anyway. It's, yeah, let these guys kill each other. Whatever sells albums, sells albums.
And this is no disrespect to anybody that was a journalist or any forms of hip hop media in the 90s. They just wasn't as sophisticated. They weren't as nuanced. If anything, they were fanning the flames of bravado.
Yeah.
The East Coast, West Coast beef. You know, what the Source and Double XL were doing for so long, beefing with each other. So, if anything, they were taking the conversation away from what would have been more sophisticated conversations about mental health, if there were going to be any, to sell copies and, you know, fan the flames that they can then later report on. You know what I mean? Versus now, where the wider context of the world is concerned way more with mental health, and that's trickled down to hip-hop media, as it would. We have people like Charlemagne, we have people like all these kind of commentators now, Joe Budden, focusing on that more. Probably because they've been through their own episodes of mental health issues as well, so they know what it's like, and they want to be able to open that up to other people as well. So,
but I feel like it's like what you said. I think as time goes on, mental health is becoming less taboo. Like when we was growing up, it was the last thing in my household anyway that there's no way a conversation is coming up about your mentally how you doing. It's just, do you know what I mean? So I just feel like as time goes on, it's just gonna become a bigger conversation as it needs to be. But early 90s, early 90s, late 90s, 2000s, I do think it was just a case where the bravado was just everything that we was getting.
to keep
There
it
there were some like journalists that were sophisticated enough to bring these things up. Like, and I'm remembering like some Tupac interviews, and he sat down with a couple of people that definitely could have. I think someone like an Angie Martinez definitely could have, because she was quite strategic and not releasing her full interview that she did with him. And I'm not saying that's coming from a mental health perspective, but it's coming from a care perspective or fanning the flame. So if you've got some of that sort of attitudes, there probably was a few more as well. There's an individual called Ed Gordon as well who interviewed Tupac, I think, just before he went to prison for the allegations. And he was asking him some real poignant questions. Do you know what I mean? And there was even I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy that interviewed him whilst he was incarcerated as well. Was also asking him some, you know, important questions as well. So there were people that could have done it. Probably not as prominent as the other shit, but there were people that could have done it.
But would they have been as loud, if you get what I mean?
Probably not. Actually, not. Maybe.
But
Because it's Tupac.
But I'm talking about in the 90s, in terms of no social media, no nothing. Do you know what I mean? Getting an interview, there was only a few mainstays. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now, you could get an interview from every Tom, Dick, and Harry. So one person can ask you something, and one person can. I think in the 90s, the way it was all new, that it was going to be generic stuff that you hear 9 times out of 10, and that's why a lot of it was East-West. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, when I say that hip-hop media wasn't as sophisticated, it's not to discount anyone in particular. It's just general hip-hop media.
Yeah.
Like, generally, they weren't caring about that sort of thing. And to keep it up, but a lot of black people didn't believe in mental health issues.
Facts.
Didn't believe it. They thought it was all a bag of rubbish. Didn't believe in therapy, all that stuff. So that plays into it as well. Even if someone like Tupac is saying all the stuff that he's saying, okay, cool, entertain me.
And we still go through that now. So imagine it's 2022 and we still have issues with mental health as black men talking about it. And so imagine in the 90s, it would have been time's up. Do you know what I mean? So I do think it's a case where it's a bigger conversation about us and how we are as
Do you
people.
think the labels have a responsibility
1000%.
to ensure that their artists have the support that they need to embark on this journey in the
When you
industry?
sign a kid straight off the streets at 18 years old, 17, you have a responsibility to give him every facility he needs to pave his way. You have that responsibility. When you sign a kid fresh off, bro, if I got a HR and I could talk mental health with my regular job, and you're talking about giving a kid,
HR as well.
do you know what I mean, though, innit? And you're giving a kid a multi-million-dollar deal, fresh from Chicago, 18 years old, about to throw him in the limelight,
Brixton.
or wherever it is, and you're about to throw him in the limelight, not knowing the amount of abuse he might get, what's going on roadside, what's going on if he has to watch his back. There's no way these men don't have a responsibility to be like, look, this is a person you can speak to every week, bi-weekly, however you want to do it, but this is your go-to person to just... They 1,000%.
Especially if you're giving them an advance and you're expecting them to reach certain numbers and reach certain targets, but you're not giving them all of the materials to really cope with reaching that. You know what I mean? Idealistically, they are responsible. But obviously, this is a business. They only care about their bottom line. If the mental health stuff that they talk about in their music is what's selling, then they're going to encourage that a lot more. I think Hardy Caprio pretty much said the same thing. He was giving the labels songs and projects that they were not caring about because they weren't the songs that made him blow up.
Yeah.
So even that takes a toll because you're pouring your heart out artistically, you think you're making strides, but the label wants you to stay in this box. I imagine that can do a lot of damage as well. So yeah, I think they are responsible. They should be anyway. And to be honest, it's not even that difficult. It's really not that
It's
difficult.
not.
You've
It's
got
not at all.
everything. Labels have got all this money at their disposal. Like they could link up with some therapists, or they could link up with a foundation, some kind of referral scheme. They could do anything if they really, really wanted to. It's really not that difficult. If anything, I think the labels are more responsible than consumers because they're hearing all of this stuff before we do. They're pushing all this stuff out. They're signing these people. They basically own these people.
There's only so much a consumer could do. Yeah, we could DM. Yeah, we could. Bro, a record label can physically make someone be like, yo, before your album comes out, I need you to just do this. Just to make sure you're right mentally before we throw out your album. And then a rapper 9 times out of 10 will be like, all right, cool. If I've got an album on the way and I just need to speak to someone for my psyche, that's fine. The record labels can have physical control over an artist. We don't.
I'm talking more about major labels as well, just to make it clear.
Yeah,
I'm not
same,
sure about
same.
independent ones. Yeah.
Question, and I don't know if you're allowed to answer this. When you were at Excel, did they have a department that dealt with their signees' mental health?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Not
Was
that I know
it
of.
ever a discussion?
No, not. I maybe it was, but I was never in those rooms. It was never discussion when I was around, and that's not to say that they weren't happening.
Yeah.
But I never heard them,
Okay.
so I was never aware. But as it pertains to major labels that have a long history of all this, especially as it pertains to signing people on 360 deals and basically owning everything that they make and all of that as well, that can all take a toll. So as much as you're taking from these artists, you can give a little as far as support in that regard. And as far as consumers are concerned, yeah, I mean, we can raise our concerns and we can, try to be there for, our favorite artists and stuff. But that, I feel like
It's only list limited.
that might maybe only go so far. Maybe one fan's pleas for you for an artist to take care of themselves will make the artist think twice. But
And that's what I was thinking, because I think we're probably way more powerful than we realise. I don't think the music industry moves without consumers. So I think the more consumers that are aware of their favourite artists going through stuff, whether it's through their music or interviews or whatever, and the more they bring shine to it, and the more they're vocal about it, it will influence or impact something.
But won't they need to speak to someone? I hear you. A fan can do
Even
a
if
lot,
it's just
but
a tweet, even if it's bare tweets,
yeah, but
even if it's bare tweets, that will vibrate something. But even if the artist sees it, it vibrates something. Somebody sees that.
no, I
That's my
understand
point.
that. But my point
I
is,
just think the consumers can't be so blind to a lot of the stuff too, man. I think we're also culpable as well of not encouraging. I don't even know what my word is. My brain's a bit frazzled right now. But what's the word I'm trying to find? Perpetuating Like, these artists not looking after themselves. If they're rapping about taking these mad drugs and it's selling music and that, are they not going to take more drugs?
Are we completely absolving the artists themselves, though?
No, we're not. I'm just saying partly. I'm just speaking as a consumer myself. I just feel like us as consumers could do a little bit more across the board. So for this particular topic, I'm mainly talking about like what we can do as well. Not to say that the artist doesn't have responsibility for themselves, and I still think the owners should be more. It's them really, but record labels have a huge part to play in it too. But consumers also as well. We can't like not have any sort of responsibility here. You know what I mean? We're a huge part of why they may make the art the way they do. So like, do you know what I mean?
But maybe it goes.
But
down.
what if they don't have that? Some artists generally just ain't about.
What do you mean?
Like what? Some artists ain't always on social media.
Okay.
So it's like at that point there, I think with fans, it's limited to what we can do. It just comes down to if they use social media. If they don't use social media, we can't. If they do, we can. Do you get what I mean? That's why to me, it's always gonna fall with the artists. Always got a responsibility upon themselves to get help if they need it.
I agree with that.
But to me, the head honcho is always gonna be, bro. I've never seen in a place where you could sign someone for a ridiculous fee. You're happy them talking about killing people left, right, and center. But you can't get them help. Like, it's just stupidity on another. Like, the more I think about it, generally, the more I'm just like, the more I get heated. Because I'm generally just thinking about it, I'm just like, bro, this is ridiculous.
Fam, I think about Amy Winehouse quite a lot, you know. Like, this babe was really singing about they're trying to make me go to rehab and that. And no one took that shit serious, you know. Like, we all celebrated that tune like it was a banger.
It is a banger, though.
But that.
I'm not refuting that.
Of course,
You know what I mean?
respectfully.
But she was clearly, like, crying out for some sort of help there. And that's not to say that her team didn't try and do a thing in that, but from a consumer's perspective, though, it was just really interesting how we all reacted to that tune.
But
what are we meant to do? Not like it.
That
I
might.
don't have an answer for you.
Do you know what I mean, though,
Yeah.
innit? It's like,
That might speak to how we see mental health as well. We might not necessarily take it as seriously either. Some of us, anyway. When we hear stuff like that, it might not register to us because we don't necessarily care about mental health either. We might just think, oh, that was a bar, or that was an amazing song. Like, look at the struggle, but you know, I'm vibing to it, sort of thing. So across the board, there needs to be some learning or unlearning or some kind of education as it pertains to mental health. There's no one who. I mean, there's definitely responsibility on all parts: the artists, the labels, the consumers. Generally, we all need to just like do better, basically. At least that's how I think.
Yeah.
no, I agree. But it's those, I really wanted to swear, but I'm going to behave.
You're just anti-label.
No, it pisses me off.
Like, every time we talk about labels, you're just like, fuck the labels.
No,
basically.
because I just think it's... How can I word this? We know who owns the labels.
Oh boy.
And we know who we're talking about when we're saying going through mental health in rappers. So you see how it looks? Do you get what I mean? Or can you not? Am I by myself here?
No, I hear you.
That's what I'm saying. You can see the optics here.
No, but you say that, bro. But then you got the Diddies and that. Do you know what I mean? Still doing the thing with their labels and that, and they're just as culpable as the big dogs.
No, you're 1,000%, and we will deal with that in-house.
In-house.
I feel you.
But yeah, I think we're all in agreement here, though. The fans can do more. The record labels should do more, and the artists seek help if you need it, man. But it's easier said than done.
So essentially, we should all do more.
Yeah, for
Across
sure.
the
It's just
board.
as a community, man. Hip hop's a community. Black music's a community. Do you know what I mean? Just across the board, as a community, we can all do more to help.
Yeah, and I think hip-hop culture is a microcosm of black culture especially, a lot of like world culture generally, and as culture shifts towards having a deeper understanding of mental health, that eventually is going to trickle down to artists, hopefully to labels, and especially to consumers as well. And with social media and with our favorite artists being so visible to us and us knowing what they're going through on a day-to-day, it's going to wise a lot of us up to what they're actually going through and what help they need from us. And we can try and enact that help.
Yeah, I mean, media play an important role too. So if I didn't make that point clear earlier, they're very important. When they sit down with these artists, like they need to raise certain points.
Yeah. I think Charlamagne always starts an interview with how's your mental health?
Yeah,
So, you know, it's happening.
yeah, good.
Yeah.